Hi, I'm Jack Moon, and if I had the opportunity to handpick my music career, I'd seriously consider that of my special guest. He tours and records with the likes of the Black Sorrows, John Farnham, Kylie Minogue, and Olivia Newton-John. He performs with the who's who of Australian pop and rock and has a fascination with Irish artist Van Morrison. Please welcome my special guest, Joe Creighton.
Thank you.
Joe, let's time shift to the 1960s. What were your first impressions of the Australian music scene when you arrived in Australia?
Culture shock. Well, when I say that, you have to understand that the scene that I left behind in Belfast in 1967 and in the United Kingdom, London, Liverpool, Newcastle, all those cities, there was a very vibrant music scene. And a lot of the pop music of the time was actually influenced very much by rhythm and blues music, blues, gospel and soul music. And there was, of course, the more commercial pop music was happening. So, the bands that were doing that. But there was, if you think about it, the Rolling Stones, Pretty Things, The Animals, the Yardbirds, and these bands were actually charting with this kind of music, which was pretty unusual in a way when you think of the 50s into the 60s movement, which was a lot more based on a very, some great songs, don't get me wrong, there were great songs, but it was much more pop-oriented.
Whereas at that era, the UK was experiencing an influx of American blues artists.
Absolutely.
And the original
a lot of those blues artists were also coming to the United Kingdom. You had Muddy Waters, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, Lightning Hopkins, John Lee Hooker, Howlin' Wolf, and it's a very incredibly culturally rich time to be growing up, and those influences were very powerful. It was an incredible scene, and I landed in Australia, and there didn't seem to be any of that at all. Now, I know there was, but it was very underground. It was in little clubs, but I couldn't see it. I had no way of seeing it because it wasn't actually on TV or anything like that. But it was mostly a very pop-based thing, and it was not to my taste because I'd come from that blues kind of thing. It was just like, oh my God, what's going on here?
So the UK was probably a decade ahead of us.
At least, particularly at that time. Because I remember walking up, when I first arrived, and I'm walking up George Street and in Sydney, and seeing businessmen in short sleeve shirts with a tie and a cobra and short pants and socks. And I thought at the time, what planet have I landed on? What is this? It was like very unusual.
So did you stay in Australia for long? Did you return
stayed
back
for
to Belfast?
Because we came out on the £10 scheme at the time, I had to stay a certain amount of time. Now, I can't remember if it was 18 months or 2 years, but I stayed for my period, and then I went back on my own. My parents stayed, and I went back to the scene in Ireland, and that was the first. I got a gig in a band called Doll's House, which was managed by a guy called George Meakin, who he managed quite a lot of big bands in Belfast at the time, and Dweller's Dream, and I can't remember some of the others that were quite popular at the time. And I toured the Links and Breads of Ireland, and it was my first experience of, travelling all around in the back of a transit band, bumping up and down on Marshall amplifiers.
Sleeping on the amps?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
And so at one stage you decided to return to Australia. What prompted that decision?
Probably travelling over icy roads on the way up to Limavady in the very north of Ireland, and almost, running under a cliff, and I kind of thought, maybe Australia's not that bad a place, after all.
So you arrived back, what year was that?
69.
69, and you hooked up with Marc Gillespie at one stage?
That's a bit later. The first band I played in was actually a band called Melissa in Sydney, which, believe it or not, the album still sells that I made with that band.
I hope you wrote some songs on it.
I did, actually. I did. I wrote a few songs that I kept seeing. I kept getting my APRA sheets and my publishing things, and there was all these royalties coming in for this song getting through, and I thought, what is that? I for years I couldn't figure what. And I realized that's from the Melissa album, and then I found out I was talking to Stuart Fraser who plays from Noiseworks, And he said, what was the band you played with back in the 60s in Sydney? And I said, Melissa. And he said, okay, my brother's sons are here and they're right into prog rock. He said, I bet you they know that band. I said, no way. He said, and he called them over. He said, Joe, what was the band? I said, Melissa. And I said, oh yeah, and they named all the songs.
Wow.
And then I found out that a lot of the young prog guys were into Melissa.
And where did you move on from there?
I went travelling for quite a long time. I went back to London for a while. And I travelled across Europe to India in search of my guru. Then I went and lived in Japan for about a year and a half, and I hooked up with quite a well-known musician there called Osamu Kitajima. He ended up working with Deep Forest people, and that he does a lot of ambient sort of with music with a lot of Japanese instruments. I lived with him, and we used to travel to Tokyo and do jingles. I sung jingles in Japanese. We did some music together, and then I came back to Australia, and I hooked up with some musicians that are still dear friends of mine, Lindsay Field and Kim O'Leary,
Yes.
and Trevor Wilson, the late Trevor Wilson from the La Di Das.
Yeah.
We formed a band called the Band of Angels and travelled all around Australia playing. And then Ross Hannaford joined that band, and we did a bit of stuff. Then Ross and I went up to Coolangatta and just did a cover gig up in the Cabbage Patch up in Coolangatta, and we started writing songs. We decided we want to form a band. We formed the band Billy T.
Billy T.
And
Yeah.
Billy T had, a certain amount of success, and we toured with Little Feat, which kind of put us on the map. I did an album, No Definitions, and one day I was sitting in my flat, and I got a knock on the door, and this big tall guy all dressed in black was there. And it was, he said, I'm Marc Gillespie. I said, oh yeah. He said, I'm a singer-songwriter. He said, I want you to join my band. I said, well, what, do you want me to come and sing my songs in your band? He said, no, I just want you to play bass. I said, and I'd never done sessions for anyone or played anything. I was in bands that I was in. I wrote songs, played bass and sung. I was a singer. And he said, no, he said, I don't want you to do that. He said, I probably want you to do some backing vocals maybe. I'm like, really? I said, why don't you get a bass player? I said, I'm a singer that happens to play bass. I said, why don't you, like Barry Sullivan or, Mike Clark, that's what those guys do. He said, no, I want what you do. He said, I've just been to Ross Hannaford's house, and he's going to do it. So I'd like you to do it as well. So I said, oh, well, I'll give it a go. And then we started playing, and then we did the Only Human album. Well, my phone didn't stop ringing after that album came out.
So that album opened up a lot of opportunities for you.
Everybody wanted me to play on their records as a bass player, and I'd never done it. I was like, really? And I didn't sort of see myself as a session player, because it's like I didn't actually think I was that good. You know what I mean? I just did what I did with the music that I was playing, and a lot of people seem to like what I do, but I never thought I'm, this gun bass player, because I would listen to someone like Barry Sullivan and Mike Clark and think, wow, they're just incredible. So Marc Gillespie got me to do this, and look, I have to say that his music was very easy for me to write bass lines for, and I reckon I did come up with some pretty good lines on those albums, and even when I hear them now, I remember Mark King, from Level 42 heard the album, he said, wow, that's a great bass player. And I'm like, Mark King thinks I'm a great bass. I just didn't think that that's what I was, But that was the start of my fork into being a session, Because that happened so much, I kind of got my muscle on being a singer-songwriter. Possibly I didn't cultivate it as much as I should have.
You primarily see yourself as a singer-songwriter. Yeah. People in the Australian music industry, in one way or another, kind of set a role for you as a dependable sideman.
Yeah.
So who are some of the artists you worked with during that period?
Sometimes I look down the list and I go, oh, I forgot I did that. It was so many people, honestly, Obviously John Farnham, Kylie Minogue, Olivia Newton-John. These are later. I'm trying to think of some of the earlier ones, but there are a myriad of them. Just like when you're doing a lot of sessions too, you actually, sometimes I hear a bass line and go, gee, that sounds really familiar. It's a nice bass line. And I think, who is this? Is that an album I have listened to? And I realise, oh, wow, that's me. And it's like, I'll hear the song, and it's like, because when you're sort of rolling them out like that, you kind of go in so quick, you go in, you do it, and you walk away from it, and it's sort of They all.
Yeah, because it's really a job, isn't it? In many senses.
Yeah, it is.
You get
It
booked
is.
for the session. You're in.
I mean,
you're out.
I really I enjoyed doing it, but I was never. You know, you read about these Nashville or New York session musicians that, you know, they have like a roadie that goes from studio to studio setting up the gear for them. And they just go that session, next session, and they've got, you know, 2 sets of gear traveling around town. I was never like that, you know.
You had dinner with George Harrison. How did that go?
Lunch, actually. Well, it's a really funny story. I heard of Ricky Fattar, who was one of the Ruttles. You know, he was drummer with Beach Boys, with Holland. And he was the Indian Ringo and the Ruttles. And I called him up one time in Sydney because I needed some work, and I'd heard him and I loved his playing. And about 2 weeks later, he called me up and he said, "Can you come and do the Tim Finn tour?" I went up, and it was Vanetta Fields on backing vocals, Mark Williams backing vocals, Mark Punch on guitar, Ricky Fattar on drums, and I'm trying to think who else. There's a few other people. Great musicians, incredible band. So I turn up at this place in Edgecliff, get out of the cab, and Rick opens the doors on the phone. He said, "Hi, Joe, would you go to the front and introduce yourself to George? He's in there, and I'll be in a minute." So I went, George, you know. So I walk into the room, and this guy, wow, he looks so familiar. And he says, "Oh, hi, Joe, I've heard all about you, you know." He said, "Come in." He said, "How's the weather in Melbourne then, you know?" And I went, "My God, George Harrison." And I went, "Oh, hi, George." And, you know, we got chatting, and then Rick said, "Oh, George wants to take us off for lunch. There's a few of us going to go." So Ricky's wife and a few other people, and we went to Mario's in Surrey Hills. And I was involved with the guru that I went to India for, when I was talking before, and so was George's wife, by some coincidence. I said, "George, actually, I know some people that know your wife really well, and the people that were involved in Maraji were called Premies." He said, "Oh, you mean the Premies?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I don't like that guy at all. You know," he says that he's, you know, he drives around these fancy cars and he's got, you know, his own personal jet." He said, "That's all right for me, so I'm an ex-pop star, you know." And he went on and on. All the people at the table are getting a bit uncomfortable. George is really laying into me a little bit. And I said, "George, does Olivia like it when you talk like this?" That's his wife. He said, "Oh, no." And I said, I don't really either." And he said, "Oh, look, I'm terribly sorry." He said, "The only thing I liked about that whole movement was the band, the One Foundation." I said, "George, that was my band." I said, "We used to travel with Maraji. We travel all around the world with them. Ross Hannaford was in that band, Jeff Bridgeford, Kim O'Leary, you know." And I said, "Well, actually," I said, "at one point you did offer your studio to us when we were in London." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I remember that." And he said, "What was that song you did?" And I started humming this song, and I got totally confused, because here am I'm sitting in front of a Beatle, and he's raving about my band. And I'm like, no, this is just too weird, you know. And I started humming the tune of Across the Universe, because it was a song we did. And he said, "No," he said, "I think you're wrong." He said, "I think John Lennon wrote that one." You know? And I'm like, oh God, it was, you know. And it was really nice. And we left the restaurant. He put his arm around me. He said, "I'm really sorry." He said, "I didn't mean to offend you." I said, "You didn't." I said, "You actually didn't offend me." I said, "But I had to let you know that it's not real." I said, I know. He said, "I go through it all the time with Olivia, you know." But it was an incredible experience.
Yeah,
just like spending
and a
time.
unique
He was
experience
a very down to earth guy, but very opinionated.
So you've toured with Farnham, Olivia Newton-John, Kylie Minogue. How do you prepare for that type of tour? How do they come about?
John Farnham had actually tried to get me a few times in the band, but I was really busy with Marc Gillespie at the time, and he ended up, I think, getting Mike Clark, who's what a bass player, you know, to have. And then eventually, I had a band with Vanetta Fields and Shirley Matthews, who was one of the Blackbirds. There were 3 Blackbirds that did all the sessions in LA, you know, for Bob Dylan, Star Is Born, all those things. I was talking on the Escapade tour. I was talking to Vanetta, and I wanted to form a gospel band doing some really, you know, like all that sort of real 50s kind of, you know, Dixie Hummingbirds, the Sensational Nightingales, kind of rockabilly gospel kind of stuff. And I'm asking them, I said, well, what do I need? I said, I've got this guy, and I had Nick Smith. I was grooming him, from the Kevins, who writes with Joe Camilleri. I had Nick, and I had somebody else, I can't remember, and I said to Vanetta, what do I need? And she said, you need me. I said, oh, you're joking, aren't you? Vanetta Fields, you play in my band? She said, yeah. And I'm like, wow. So we went to the tour, and when we came back, we formed a band. And we started playing around, and we were doing very well around Melbourne on sort of just doing a lot of corporate work and making quite a lot of money at the time. We were playing at the Troubadour on Brunswick Street, and John Farnham came one night. I was very moved by the music. I remember he had tears in his eyes, And he asked us if we'd come and do support with him, but we were so busy in doing stuff we couldn't. And then he came back and he asked Vanetta to join the band. And Vanetta said, yeah, she would join. And I remember saying to me, I only want to do this for a year and a half because I really want to focus on my own career. A year later, he came and asked me to join, and I felt the same way. I'll do this for a little while. She lasted 8 years. I lasted 13 years.
That's amazing. What a stint. I mean,
so that was that's how that came about.
And you not only toured Australia, you toured parts of Europe, I believe.
Yep.
Did you ever convince Farnham to drop the suit?
No, I didn't really want to go there at the time. I always thought it was a bit kind of funny, it's like that actually.
No offense, John. I'm just.
No, that came from a comment in Europe. It was in Germany. How could you play rock and roll in a suit?
That's amazing. 13 years with one of our premier artists, and what was a great band too.
Yeah,
for those years.
incredible
Lindsay
band.
Field was in that band as well.
That's right. That's correct.
The Kylie tour. I mean, I wouldn't normally associate you being on a Kylie tour.
Look,
how'd that come about?
Really funny. She did that album. I can't remember the name of the album, but it was some really good songs on it. It was kind of it was a bit left of centre, a bit grungy. It was two young English sort of techno guys did it, and they did the programming. I can't remember the name of the producer. He actually came out with her to do it. And it was actually really good. It was good fun, and there's a DVD available of that. If you ever get a chance, it might be called something like, it was the Impossible Princess Tour, And,
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, and the DVD is pretty incredible. Like the music it's really well played. And we had a couple of English musicians. In fact, one of them still lives now in Australia, James Mack. He was the percussionist. He played a lot of the break beats, but he played them live, with electronic. Angus Birchall played the sort of the acoustic drums, and they had this sort of guitar player that was just fantastic, and he and Stuart Fraser worked really well together. Chong kind of put the band, it was basically the Farnham band with a few additions, and we went to Europe with her, and we played in the Town and Country, a few nights in the Town and Country, played the Palais in the State Theatre here, and it was a lot of fun. She's a great girl. She's great fun to work with, and very, very creative. And the music actually stood up really well. I mean, obviously you have, the locomotion, the pop songs, and I Should Be So Lucky going on. But she tried to kind of meld them into what she was doing, and she took the reins and drove her career after that,
And great that you did those tours as well.
Yeah, it was good. It was a very exciting thing to do, A bit, as you say, not the usual thing that I would probably do, but I found it very rewarding and good fun.
Yeah. So you've done some high-profile tours and lots of gigs around town. Did you ever have to get a real job to fill in any lean times?
Look, there was a while back, I'm trying to think when it was, about 10 years ago, and I took a job as a rep with selling Gibson guitars.
That'd be Gallons?
That's correct. AMI, actually. And it didn't end well, but it was okay. It's like, I remember Con, God love him. I mean, Con's a great businessman, but he's a tough character. And I remember he called me up one morning about 11 o'clock and he said, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm at home." And he said, "Why aren't you in the office?" I said, "Because I'm in front of my computer working." He said, "I'm not paying you to stay at home to work." And I said, "I've just written you $20,000 of orders, and I'm not even out of my pajamas yet." I said, "Is that a problem?" "You employed an ex-rock star, You expect I'm going to be out of bed?" I said, "Any problem with my figures?" no. I said, well, let it go. Let it go. But he wasn't happy with it, but I tried it. Look, I had a bit of fun with it. And it was good fun, going around stores because of the profile that I'd had. A lot of those store owners were because most of them are musicians. And they've done that because it's like they haven't been able to make it in the music world, so they've gone into business, with quite a lot of them. And they were happy to have a chat. And in the meantime, you want to do it? Oh, yeah, bang, And it was actually pretty easy to sell.
You have a deep respect for the music of Van Morrison.
I do.
And you have your own show, Into the Mystic. Have you two met? And what can the audience expect in the show?
Oh, a multifaceted question. I have been in proximity with Van Morrison, this close, but I haven't actually spoken to him. I found him to be not a terribly approachable person, and I was also very young at the time. I used to go to a lot of the gigs that he played with them, and he was our hero, because he was playing the music that we loved. Back in those days, there was a group of us, and my friend Hayden McClenaghan, his brother used to go to London quite a lot, and he used to bring back a lot of great blues records. There's also a great store in Belfast that sold a lot of this stuff. And he had a massive collection of blues, R&B, jazz, and when he was out, used to sneak into his room. We were only like 14, 15 at the time. We used to sneak into his room and play the records, because we thought he was like I guess you call he's a hip cat, he's a beatnik, that kind of thing. The music has always resonated very deeply with me. Like at times when I'm trying to write my own music, I'll maybe just play a track from, a song from Astral Weeks, just for inspiration. And I saw what John Waters was doing with the John Lennon show, Glass Onion, and I saw what Tex was doing with the Man in Black. And they were both doing kind of a tribute show, but with integrity. And I thought, I wonder if people would like it to hear Van Morrison done not so coming in a funny hat and turning you back to the audience, but doing it actually from the heart, and maybe spinning a few yarns, because I grew up with all that stuff, the Troubles, the civil rights movement of the 60s, and that music was all very much part of it, So I wanted to do this as a stage show. I wanted to do it as, with the projections of, images of Belfast, the Troubles, the British Army there, and all that kind of stuff. And I did a gig with a friend of mine, Gary Young. He called me up one day and he said, "Do you want to do a shitty gig in a shitty venue for fuck all money?" And I said, "How can I resist, Gary?" So I went and played and did some gigs with them just at this little local cafe near where we lived. And I was telling him about my idea, and I want to do this, and I want to do, and projections and all this stuff's going to be. And he said, "Why don't you start doing it with us?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, just start it." And I said, "Yeah, well, what a good idea." And we started, and we advertised it, and we filled the joint. And then I approached Peter Foley from Caravan Club. And I told Peter about it, and I'd worked there with, Revelators, Black Stories. He's a big Marc Gillespie fan, so I think he indulged me. But he said, "Yeah," he said, "sounds a bit tribute bandish to me. I'm not that into it, but we'll do it. We'll give you a night." Well, he gave me his shittiest night. He gave me Thursday night. Nobody goes to Caravan on Thursday night. It just never, Well, we put 300 people in that night.
Oh, how's that?
Bang! So it's like,
right.
And I said to him, "You're not so lukewarm on it now, are you?" And he said, "No, let's do it again." And it just grew from that.
What are you doing these days? Are you working on any projects at this particular time?
I have a few ideas in the mix. I'm always trying to write. Always trying to do another album. I do actually. One of the advantages of this, of having a big audience, is I get to sell quite a few CDs. So I'm able to sell my back catalogue for CDs quite a lot, and that's useful. So I'm trying to write more music. And I do little bits of, last year I did some film music for someone, little bits and pieces here and there.
I might just say too that your website is a researcher's paradise.
Good.
Yeah, your CV and timeline makes fascinating reading, and viewers should check out joecreighton.com. And Joe, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
very much, Jack. That's great. That's great.